Okay guys, in this tutorial we're going to discover what it is to use the transform tool, and basically you're going to find that by coming up to edit and coming down to transform and picking some of the options that you have selected here. So right now 3 of them are grayed out, but you can choose scale, rotate, skew, distort, perspective, or warp if you have something selected. So right now if we were to take this object here and we were able to, let's say, rasterize the layer, that should bring the rest of our options back into play. So distort, perspective, and warp. So if you ever see these last 3 that are not selected, just go over to your layer that you're trying to use one of those options for, and go ahead and right click on that layer and hit rasterize layer or rasterize layer style, and that should make those options pop up. Okay, so if we come here to transform and hit scale, it's exactly what it sounds like. You'll get your bounding box, and these little squares here are the areas where you can grab and start transforming the scale. So if you were to grab here, click and hold and move, you're going to be able to play with the vertical rise and fall of the image. And if you were to hit the corner, you're going to be able to control the entire dimension. So it's important that you recognize that whatever opposite layer opposite corner you choose, this one will always stay in position if you grab this corner. You see how it stays in position? And if you grab this corner, this one will stay in position because it's the opposite. So just recognize that. So I'm going to go back a couple times and get us back to where we were at. There we go. Okay, so if we want to go ahead and transform scale this, but keep it in proportion, hold your shift key and then click and drag, and you will always have your image in proportion no matter how big or small you want it. So that's pretty much the scale transform option. But if we wanted to take this and rotate it, we could hit rotate, just hover over the corner, don't even have to click anything, and you'll get this curved arrow, which means that when you click and hold, you'll be able to rotate. And if you hold shift, it'll do it at 45-degree angles all the way around, which is kind of nice because sometimes you want something exactly at 45 degrees, or if you want it at 90-degree turn, you can do that very easily. So if you want to go and play with the skew, this is going to get a little funky. Notice how my cursor there turned into this little white arrow that lets me know that I'm in the skew tool, and you can skew one corner at a time and play with the dimensions. But notice how when I grab the sides, it's skewing everything on an axis of the left-hand side versus the right-hand side. So beware of that. Corners do just the corner itself, and if you grab a side in the middle here, it's going to do it on a whole axis compared to the other side. So that's just important for you to recognize. Let's go on to the next one. If we do distort, again, a little funkier. Now we can move this all around. We're not just limited to an axis. We can actually play around with the entire image and start doing some flips and stuff like that and get real funky like that. So it's the distort option under edit transform. Then you have perspective, which I think is pretty cool. So if you wanted to make something look a little bit more 3D, you could use this and get a different perspective like it was in a mirror. And probably my favorite of all time is the warp tool. And if you like graphic design, you will use this constantly. Notice how I have these little bubbles here. So I can actually control the entire grid. So if I click this one, I can actually control this whole grid by these little Bezier handles. So notice what it's doing is that it's actually controlling the corners, and then these are Bezier handles on the corners that allow you to manipulate the image and get some really funky warp looking things going on, which is pretty cool. Especially when you're playing around with vector images, you can start to get pretty weird and bend some things in some awkward ways, and really get some cool graphic design options going. So, bet you didn't think you could make a gun look like that inside of Photoshop, but you can. So, those are the transform basics. Just some other quick transform options that I want to show you. You have these automatic rotations, so 180 degrees. You can go 90 degrees if you wanted, clockwise or counterclockwise, but these are probably going to be more what you use. So flip horizontal. Now you can imagine, see how it flipped it like that? If I wanted to come over here and right click on my layer, duplicate my layer, just say yes, and then so I have that top layer selected, come back to my transform tool and flip it. Voila, now I got two guns that are crossed, and that looks pretty cool just by clicking one option in the transform tool. That's pretty easy. And of course you can take these and move them out if you don't like the way they're so close and crisscrossed. But pretty cool stuff. And of course, if you wanted to, you could come here, transform, and flip vertical, and now all of a sudden you got a whole nother option where we can make a cool graphic design thing where these are lined up just perfectly, just like that, and now it's a whole new look. So that's the transform tool. It'll let you make things bigger, smaller, change the perspective, distort them, warp them, and flip them. Just remember, it's always going to be under your edit, transform, and you can start picking some of these options. And you also have this free transform tool that kind of lets you do anything you want between scaling and rotating. So if you don't want to do anything with warping or scaling and you're more concerned about perspective, you may want to look at the free transform tool as your first choice. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the transform options and some basics in that area, and I hope you join me for the next lecture.